They tell you that time heals all wounds, but that's a lie told by people who have never had to scrub a friend's blood from their own hands. Time doesn't heal, it scarifies. It leaves a thick, ugly layer of tissue over the injury, a constant pulling reminder of the failure beneath. For me, that scar tissue felt exactly like the frozen landscape of the Whispering Peaks tonight, vast, silent, and suffocatingly cold. My partner, Ben Carter, had been gone for 3 months, but I could still hear the ghost of his last breath in the whistle of the wind through the pines. The official report called it an interagency operation gone wrong. I called it my fault. The department called it a mandatory suspension, pending a federal investigation. So here I was, a 36-year-old man with a suspended badge on the passenger seat and a hole in my soul, driving my unmarked cruiser nowhere on a Tuesday night. The snow was coming down in thick, wet flakes, blanketing the mountain roads and muffling the sound of my tires. It was better than the silence of my empty cabin, where the only thing louder than the ticking clock was the memory of Ben's wife sobbing at his funeral. I was so lost in that memory that I almost didn't see it. A flicker of movement, a blur of dark fur against the blinding white, right in the center of my high beams. My foot slammed the brake by instinct. The tires locked, skidding on a patch of ice with a sickening groan before the cruiser jolted to a halt. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of adrenaline and dread. I'd hit it. God, I'd hit a deer. Or worse. I shoved the door open, the frigid air a shock to my lungs, and stepped out into the storm. But the figure in my headlights wasn't a crumpled heap. It was standing. It was a puppy, a German Shepherd mix, no more than 4 months old. Snow clung to his belly and paws, and his small body trembled. But it wasn't from the cold alone. His eyes, wide and amber, were locked on mine, and they burned with a kind of desperate terror I'd only ever seen in the eyes of soldiers and victims. "Hey there, buddy," I said softly, my voice rough. I expected him to bolt into the safety of the woods. That's what a scared animal does. He didn't run. He took a hesitant step forward, then another. Then he did something that stopped the breath in my chest. He lunged, not to bite, but to grab the hem of my heavy coat firmly in his teeth. He tugged once, a sharp, insistent pull. He let go, let out a single cracked bark, and tugged again. My cop brain, the part of me I couldn't suspend, kicked in. He wasn't panicked. He was communicating. He was asking for something. He released my coat, barked one last time, and then turned, darting off the road into the black maw of the forest. He stopped just at the tree line, a small, brave silhouette against the dark, and looked back at me. It was an invitation, a plea. Every rational part of my mind screamed at me to get back in the warmth of my car and drive away. It wasn't my problem. I wasn't a cop tonight. But the look in that little dog's eyes held something I thought I'd lost forever. A mission. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered to the howling wind. But I was already reaching back into the car for my heavy-duty flashlight. For the first time in 3 months, I wasn't running from something. I was heading toward it. The forest floor was a treacherous landscape of hidden roots and deep pockets of snow, each step a gamble. The beam of my flashlight cut a frantic, bouncing path through the darkness. But my true guide was the tiny, determined dog I now knew as Kodi. He'd run 20 feet, then stop, his head cocked, waiting for my clumsy human form to catch up. The wind was a physical presence, tearing at my coat and whipping snow into my face, but I barely felt the cold. The fire that had been extinguished in me 3 months ago had found a new spark of kindling. I was on a mission. After what felt like an eternity, Kodi stopped at the edge of a thicket. He didn't look back this time. He just whined, a low, ragged sound that cut through the howl of the wind. I pushed past a snow-laden fern, and my light found her. The sight sent a current of cold fury through me, sharper than the frigid air. A full-grown female German Shepherd, her magnificent coat matted with dirt and dried blood, lay half-conscious in the snow. Her hind leg was grotesquely twisted in the rusted steel jaws of a hunting trap, an old, brutal model that had been illegal in Colorado for years. Her ribs showed through her side, and her breathing was a shallow, labored flutter. She was dying. Kodi rushed to her side, licking her ear, his tiny body a stark contrast to her still form. I dropped to my knees beside them. "Easy, girl," I whispered, not to her, but to myself. The part of me that was still a cop took over. I scanned the area. No fresh tracks but ours. But the falling snow could have covered anything. Pulling out the multi-tool I always carried, a habit from the force I couldn't unlearn, I began to work on the trap's corroded mechanism. My fingers were numb, clumsy with cold and adrenaline, but I forced them to move. The mother dog, I found myself thinking of her as Nova, a new star in this dark night. Tensed, but didn't fight. After several curses and a groan of protesting metal, the steel jaws finally loosened. I gently pried them open and pulled her leg free. It was a mess, mangled and bloody. Stripping off my flannel shirt without a second thought, I wrapped it tightly around the wound to staunch the bleeding. Then, using the emergency blanket from my cruiser's go bag, I bundled both dogs together against the cold. Just as a sliver of relief began to settle in my chest, the forest changed. The wind died down to an eerie whisper, and a new sound slithered through the trees. It was a low growl, deep and feral, vibrating with a hunger that turned my blood to slush. Wolves, drawn by the scent of blood. My hand instinctively went to my hip for the sidearm that wasn't there. It was locked in the glove box of my car, a stupid civilian mistake. The kind of mistake Ben never would have let me make. The growl echoed again, closer this time. 2 pinpricks of green light reflected back at me from the tree line. I stood up, placing my body between the wolves and the 2 dogs, my heavy flashlight the only weapon I had. But before I could do anything, something incredible happened. Kodi, the trembling pup who weighed less than my service boots, stepped forward. He stood between me and the unseen predators. His back arched, his legs stiffened, and a sound rose from his tiny throat. It started as a shaky whimper, but grew into a fierce, defiant snarl. He was a tiny sentinel holding the line against the vast, hungry wilderness. Inspired by her son, Nova lifted her head and let out a weak, warning growl of her own. For a long, heart-stopping minute, the standoff held. Then, as if they decided the effort wasn't worth it, the green eyes vanished. The presence in the woods was gone. I sank to a crouch, my heart hammering. "You're not just a pup, are you?" I whispered, pulling Kodi close. "You're a damn guardian." It was then that I heard another sound, this one mechanical and blessedly human, the faint hum of an engine. It grew louder, and soon headlights cut through the trees. A familiar Timber Ridge County Patrol SUV crunched to a halt on the nearby access road. Dr. Eva Rostova jumped out, her service weapon drawn but pointed downward. Relief washed over her face when she saw me. "Alex, I was about to call in a search party." "Eva, what are you doing out here?" "You missed 2 radio check-ins. I got a bad feeling," she said, her eyes immediately falling on the wounded dog. Her training as a vet tech before she joined the force was evident as she knelt, her expression all business. "God, that leg is bad. We need to move now." As she helped me create a makeshift sling to carry Nova, I looked at her. "You broke protocol coming out here alone." She met my gaze without flinching, a wry smile on her lips. "So did you, Riley. So did you." The ride to the county's small wildlife rehabilitation center was a blur of flashing lights and strained silence. Eva had called ahead, and a team was waiting for us. They whisked Nova away on a gurney down a sterile white hallway, leaving me, Kodi, and the scent of antiseptic behind. The moment Nova disappeared behind a set of double doors, Kodi lost it. He lunged against my grip, scratching frantically at the tile and letting out a howl so full of heartbreak and despair, it echoed everything I felt inside. They put him in a quiet holding room with a heated floor and a glass wall, but he ignored the water bowl and the soft blanket. He just paced, a frantic, endless circle, before planting his front paws on the glass, his nose pressed against the barrier, staring at the doors that had swallowed his mother. I sat on the cold linoleum floor outside that room for hours watching him. A nurse offered coffee, which I refused. In Kodi's desperate vigil, I saw my own. I saw myself standing helpless in a hospital corridor, my hands covered in Ben's blood, listening to the flat, final drone of a heart monitor. This little dog, with his unwavering loyalty, understood loss in a way no human ever could. He and I were the same. We were the ones left behind to keep watch. Late that evening, Eva found me still sitting there. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. She didn't say anything, just slid a manila file across the floor toward me. "I ran the specs on that trap you described," she said quietly. "It's an old model, a specific type. I cross-referenced it with past poaching incidents and known offenders in the area." I opened the folder. Inside was a grainy surveillance photo from a game camera, taken a week ago, 10 miles north of where I found Nova. It showed a burly bearded man in camouflage setting something metallic at the base of a pine tree. My blood ran cold. My jaw tightened so hard I felt a crackle in my teeth. I knew that face. I knew the cold, pale eyes and the cruel set of his mouth. "Silas Croft," I breathed, the name tasting like ash. "Got out of prison last fall after serving 4 years," Ava confirmed, her voice grim. "You were the arresting officer on that case, weren't you, Alex?" I couldn't take my eyes off the photo. It wasn't a random act of cruelty. This wasn't about a wounded dog anymore. The ghost I had been running from for years wasn't just in my head. He was out there, in my woods, and he had just made this personal. The name Silas Croft hung in the air between Eva and me, a ghost resurrected from a past I had tried to bury. The weeks that followed were a new kind of purgatory, the waiting. I officially adopted both dogs. My lonely cabin, once a monument to my guilt, was now a home. Nova, resilient and dignified, learned to navigate the world on 3 legs, her quiet strength a constant source of awe. Kodi grew from a lanky pup into a striking young dog, his eyes holding a keen intelligence that missed nothing. He was my shadow, my partner in a silent, 2-man watch. With Eva's help, I'd set up a perimeter of motion-triggered cameras around my property. Twice they caught him, a broad, hooded figure moving like a phantom just inside the tree line. Croft wasn't just poaching, he was watching me. He was hunting. The knowledge coiled in my gut, a cold, hard knot of anticipation. This wasn't going to end with him just fading away. It had to be a reckoning. It came on a crisp morning in early spring. The last of the snow had melted into the soil, and the air smelled of wet earth and pine. I was on the porch, sipping coffee, when Kodi, who had been dozing at my feet, suddenly went rigid. He didn't bark. He rose, every muscle tensed, and gave a low, barely audible growl directed at the northern ridge. His eyes were locked, his body a coiled spring of lethal focus. I set my mug down, my heart starting a slow, heavy drum beat. The wait was over. I grabbed my sidearm, radioed Eva our prearranged signal, and followed my partner into the woods. Kodi moved with a silent, deadly grace I'd come to trust more than my own instincts. He wasn't just tracking a scent, he was closing in on an enemy. I could hear Eva moving through the underbrush on my flank, our movements a practiced pincer maneuver. We burst through a thicket of aspen trees, and there he was. Silas Croft stood near a rock outcropping, his face wilder, his eyes more desperate than I remembered. Rage and resentment had carved deep lines into his features. Before I could shout a command, Kodi shot forward, tackling Croft low and hard. They went down in a tangle of fur and fury. Croft was bigger, stronger, and kicked the dog off with a vicious curse. He scrambled to his feet, pulling a long hunting knife from a sheath on his belt as Kodi prepared to lunge again. "I'll gut you, you mutt!" he screamed, his eyes burning with hate. The world slowed. I saw the knife arc, and my blood ran cold. But it never found its mark. A gray blur exploded from the trees to my left. It was Nova. Moving with a speed I never thought possible on her 3 good legs, she slammed into Croft's side with the full force of her body. There was no bark, no whimper, just the shocking, committed impact of a mother protecting her child. She was a force of pure maternal fury. The attack staggered Croft, knocking him off balance for just 1 critical second. It was all I needed. My shot was precise, the rubber round hitting him squarely in the shoulder. He dropped with a grunt, the knife clattering harmlessly against the rocks. As the sound of the cuffs clicking shut echoed in the sudden silence of the forest, I could only stare at Nova. She stood over her son, trembling from exertion, her one good eye fixed on the man on the ground, an unyielding guardian who had faced down a monster and won. The click of the cuffs locking around Silas Croft's wrist was the loudest sound in the forest. For a moment, the world stood still, holding its breath. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep quiet. Eva was on the radio, her voice calm and professional as she called in the arrest. But my attention was elsewhere. I walked past the defeated man on the ground and knelt in the damp soil. My hand, trembling slightly, rested on Nova's back. I could feel the tremors of exertion under her coarse fur, but her breathing was steady. She had done it. She had faced down the monster that had crippled her and had not flinched. Kodi was immediately at her side, nudging his head under her chin, licking the side of her face in soft, reassuring strokes. She had saved her son, and in doing so, they had both, in their own fierce and loyal way, saved me. I looked from the brave mother to her valiant son, and a weight I hadn't even realized I was still carrying finally lifted from my shoulders. The ghost of Ben Carter wasn't gone, but for the first time, I felt like I could stand beside his memory instead of hiding from it. Eva came and stood beside me, looking down at the two dogs. "Now that," she said softly, "is a partnership they don't teach you at the academy. A year can erase the memory of snow and replace it with the warmth of a summer sun. It can turn a broken-down cabin into a home, and it can transform a broken-down man into someone whole again." I felt the familiar, comfortable weight of my uniform as I stood in the center of Riverside Memorial Park. My badge was pinned to my chest, no longer a symbol of failure, but of a second chance. At my side, sitting with the proud, steady posture of a certified K-9 officer, was Kodi. He was bigger now, his sleek coat gleaming in the afternoon light, but his eyes held the same watchful intelligence I'd seen on that snowy road. We were watching the mayor unveil a new bronze statue. It wasn't of a general or a politician. It was small, meticulously sculpted to depict a German Shepherd pup. One paw slightly lifted, his gaze fixed on some unseen point down the path, his body lean but his stance unyielding. Resting in the grass near my feet, chin on her paws, was Nova. She watched the proceedings with a calm, quiet dignity, the quiet hero of a story only a few of us truly knew. The plaque on the statue read, "To the sentinel of whispering peaks, who dared to stop the world to save a life." The crowd applauded politely, and as the people began to disperse, I looked from the bronze pup to my living, breathing partners. I thought of that night, of the man I was, lost in a storm of my own making. I had driven into that forest to save a dog, a simple act of decency that I thought was for them. I know now that was never the whole story. My hand came to rest on Cody's head, my other stroking Nova's soft ear. The truth is, that little dog and his crippled mother stood their ground in the freezing dark, and in their profound, unwavering courage, they rescued me. The story of Alex, Kodi, and Nova serves as a profound reminder of a truth we often learn late in life. Our most significant turning points rarely arrive with loud fanfare. Instead, they often appear quietly, like a small, determined puppy standing in the middle of a lonely road, asking not for salvation, but for a chance to lead us toward it. For many, life is a collection of memories, some cherished and others heavy with the weight of regret. Like Alex, we can become lost in the storms of our past, believing our story has already been written. But this tale teaches us that it is never too late to find a new purpose. That purpose is often found not in grand ambitions, but in the simple, selfless act of caring for another. When we extend a hand to help a creature in need, be it a loyal dog or a friend in sorrow, we are not just mending their wounds, but also our own. The responsibility gives us a reason to look forward, not back. The story also illuminates the different faces of courage. It is not only the trained strength of an officer, but also the desperate bravery of a tiny pup standing against the dark and the fierce, sacrificial love of a wounded mother. It reminds us to never underestimate the strength found in quiet dignity and unwavering loyalty. The love offered by an animal is pure. It does not judge our past failures or question our worth. It simply is. This unconditional bond has a power to heal that no amount of time can replicate. Perhaps the most important lesson is that in the beautiful economy of life, the roles of rescuer and rescued are constantly changing. We may set out thinking we are the ones providing shelter and care, only to discover that the love and purpose we receive in return is the very thing that saves us from our own solitude. We are reminded to keep our hearts open, for we never know when our next great purpose will appear, trembling but resolute, waiting for us to follow.